Okay, now it's 32. I think we should start. Okay. Thank you very much for the ones that are present. This will be an interactive session, which will be a continuation of the session on micromobility that we just had. This time it will be more interactive, so people can come to the stage, they can speak. I think Isabel is going to make a little bit of housekeeping, just to give you a few hints how to deal with the system, because you can come to the stage. So Isabel, can you explain what's a few things?
Hello, everybody. Yes, as Mario said, we welcome to this session. I should be here. Interactive gameplay on new ways of how to deal with public space. So as Mario said, it's going to be a very interactive session. So I will just take you through how you can interact with our speakers and how you can come to the stage with a few housekeeping slides. This is a continuation of a session beforehand, so we're continuing on some of the same themes. As you may know, we have the chat, the polls, the people in the Q&A on the right-hand side. And you can post in the chat through that. I would just say make sure that you are under the sessions tab rather than the event tab. The orange line should be under the sessions. That way you can post in this session, not in the main event. And you can send direct messages to other participants here, and you can see other events after the session and networking after the session as well. And as I said, you can write your comments in the comments section and the chat and the polls and the Q&A. And what is not shown on here is to interact with our speakers and come on the stage, as you will be asked to do so later in the session. You have an orange button on the top right of the screen, which says share audio and video. You can do this, you can request this, and then the moderator will allow you to come on stage, and he will tell you when you can. And so then you can appear on the stage, and you will therefore, if we weren't in Corona times, we weren't virtual, you would be literally stepping onto the stage. So that would be super fun. We are the only session I know of doing this, so enjoy. And I'd just like to make sure that you are aware that the session is being recorded, and these recordings will be shared online. When you are coming onto the stage to talk, just make sure you're aware of that, and follow these rules. So when speaking, be brief and to the point. And when you're on stage, you will be able to share your video and your microphone. So make sure you are not on mute, as we often find ourselves doing. And again, after these are things you can do. So I'll hand you over to Mario.
Wait, Isabel, can you just borrow me the last slide you have? Yes, that one, yes. Okay, good. Okay, so yes, this session will be mainly led by Sónia Lavadinho, and this will be, we did try to make an interactive session based that we did together in Walk 21 with the maquettes and utensils and a lot of fun. And Sónia will be led, but instead will be video. And Marjolein, apologies, because she had a last-minute health point for today, so she will not be present. And then we have Alexandre Santacreu from the International Transport Forum, and we'll be joined by José Rojo from POLIS, that will be also commenting the video. So we'll be the four of us will be commenting videos, and we'll be having also a discussion about the big questions from the previous session. But let's start, and as we said, as Isabel explained, you can really come into the stage when we ask you to do so. I will give you the instructions, and we'll be here to help. So don't worry, and come to the stage and speak, and let's talk together with the video and the camera on. Don't worry, your haircut is fine. We will love to see you. Sónia, you can start. Thank you, Isabel. Sónia, your mic is off.
It's a pleasure to share with you these videos. So it's videos which are very pragmatic, videos on the spot that I took in many situations regarding these shared space issues. We'll start with Paris, with situations which are pretty conflictual, as you will see, because in the Paris situations, we see that the space is usually very narrow, and that there is an option of really segmenting the space, and we'll see how
I should share. I should
problems.
share now?
Yes, we can start with this Pont de la Concorde maybe, and then Jaurès, and we'll see the situations, and I'll discuss them as you launch. So this Pont de la Concorde is, as you know, if you know Paris, at the entrance of this bridge, La Concorde, which is an important bridge towards the monument of La Concorde, the Place de la Concorde. It's a place where there is a lot of people, of course, because there's a lot of people walking on the Berge de Seine, lots of people crossing the bridge, lots of people going to the monuments. And we can see how this idea of putting people on the sidewalk is truly not working. There are lots of micro problems with simply the insertion, getting in and out of the space is a real problem. And we can also see that the idea of doing biface counter movements, so the cycles are supposed to come on the reverse side, but we see how difficult that is. And of course, considering the number of pedestrians, and some bikes, as you can see, try to go on the bus lane, but it's also quite complicated, because even though this is supposedly a bus lane en site propre for the buses, there's still a lot of cars also on this lane, and it's of course pretty dangerous. The lane is too narrow to actually really accommodate the cyclists and the buses, and because of the also the system of the lights, then everybody gets stuck on that lane. So people indeed do prefer to come on the sidewalk, but we see it's really very complicated. This sidewalk is definitely too narrow to accommodate. But what we do see also is that there is an underuse of the lane, which was supposedly to welcome the cyclists coming up, and an overuse of the lane going up. So we see these are real problems, and it's really not efficient as a way to do it. And I guess we can all agree that here more space would be needed. And the discussion that we'll have right after this Paris illustrations is about how can we do maybe a different option of what's going on. So do pay attention to the whole space that we have, not just the sidewalk, right? Because we do have other lanes. You can see that there is congestion. It's not a simple situation also for the cars. So of course, I'm not saying the solution is easy, but we can definitely maybe say, especially now, see how these poor tourists that were coming out of a Uber try to insert with their valise, with their suitcases on this path, and how difficult that seems to be. So this was the first example. We'll show immediately the second example of Paris, which is the Métro Jaurès, if you have it, Mario. This is on a tube. So we're here at a situation where we're at the metro station. So we have this insertion of the lanes, of the bike lanes, which are inserted right next to where the metro station is coming. You can see that people do kind of know that there is some people do know that there is a bike lane immediately on the metro entrance, but you can see how difficult it is when you're getting out of the metro or going in, and because of all these lateral movements of pedestrians and the fact that we are in a curve, definitely this type of setting is probably not the best. We can see how it's already a narrow space in itself, considering all that is happening here. But maybe we can also consider that making these little narrow priority lanes is definitely not really working. So
okay, so we had two videos of Paris.
Two videos of Paris. We can open the discussion. about
can
this.
open a little bit of a discussion. I have to say we sound a little bit like the Eurovision Song Festival. We can give points 1 to 5. I think we had quite the bad and the ugly here. Anybody want to come to the stage to speak about it or to look at it? One thing that is quite obvious, and as the Federation International Pedestrian and for cyclists, is that cycling on the sidewalk or using micromobility on the sidewalk, it's really problematic because the space is not enough. And as a traffic engineer, we all know that when we get to the intersection, actually the bikes and the e-scooters, they come out on the wrong way, so basically there is a lot of conflict with cars. So Paula, Dagmar, would you like to come to stage to speak, or you just prefer to listen? No? Okay. Alexandra, Maria, would you like to comment these videos?
Well, maybe I can say that in the second video, we had also a specific situation, which is the entrance to a metro station. And for example, during the COVID, we have seen, for example, close to bus stops, how much space there is needed, not only for walking, but also for waiting for people. So I think these are specific sensitive areas where more space is needed for pedestrians, not only to walk, but also to wait in line or to stand for a while. There are also like somehow meeting points. So I think that's it's an impression I have, which is a specific situation of this case.
Yes, Alexander?
And yes, to comment on those two examples from the city where I live in, they have points in common. They are both disgraceful, absolutely, and they both show that when you have a very dense pedestrian traffic, people feel entitled to the pavement and they don't pay attention. And this is a general rule. The more you have of one given road user type, the more that road user feels entitled and the less they pay attention. It is true for cars.
Yeah.
You
Critical
could provide,
mass.
yes, you could provide shared space, 30 kph speed limit, like Exhibition Road in London. And yet, if they feel entitled, they speed, they don't pay attention, they are distracted, etc., and they become bullies.
Yeah.
And that is true for every road user type. So here, separation is probably what would work best. Yes.
Yes. I would say also on what Maria said, that there was a lot of queuing during COVID, and there is a lot of terraces also, which is a good thing. Terraces are a good thing for cities, but unfortunately, a lot of terraces are being put on the sidewalk, which is actually not the good thing. So there will be a lot of solutions that would be parklets or something like that. That would be actually an opportunity to reduce car parking, and we know that car parking is the best way to control and reduce the presence of cars in cities. So that's actually not an opportunity, not a problem to have need of more terraces. The other thing that Alexander said is that there is quite a big challenge, and he told me in the first session that we have to be aware that the city has different periods, for example at night, and share space in the critical mass of shared space, they vary. So if there is a lot of rain, or if it is at night, suddenly the critical masses vary a lot. So there is less pedestrians, so the cars increase the speed. Yes. So it is something that we should be aware of. Sonia?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Paris is now indeed doing this, and with their new policy of they're going to suppress about half of the places for cars to park in the streets during these next 4 years. So there was a big consultation of public concertation about this question. So I'll be interested in seeing, many of the things that are being said that people said that they wanted to do with this space is indeed making more space for terraces, more space for gardening, more space for trees, and we'll see how all these new square meters, because we're talking of thousands of square meters, even dozens of thousands, how this will change the way streets are used in Paris in the future. But I do agree with you that because of the high density of pedestrians in Paris, you really have to. I mean, the sidewalks are really already not big enough, so we should really take more space. And it's actually possible in the sense that it's already only 17% of car use, modal split in Paris, but still the streets look like if you still had 40% or 50% of car use. So I think it's also something that really needs to evolve a bit quicker. Sometimes cities don't do enough to actually really change their spaces according to the effective modal split that they already have. We are kind of running behind in terms of the way the public space should look like. So let's move on to our next example,
okay.
maybe.
Yeah.
Which are
Basel.
Basel, yeah. Basel is an interesting case. Here, a case which is the only case that I really saw that was a bit of a conflict. I must say it's a hard place, but it's interesting to see several things that they did, namely things to make it easier to know where you are. So in Basel, the lanes for turning, especially, are also done in a way that you can access the middle of the road, as you can see here. So there's that's something that is usually done pretty systematically in Basel, and I quite like that system because it makes it easier to turn when you have to turn, when you have several lanes. And you can see at the bottom of this image that there's actually also at the signalétique in these big panel that tell you where to go. They also make these specific indications for the bikes, which I find interesting. But it's still a very hard node, this one. It has a lot of people. It's right next to the train station, and it is fairly complicated. You can see here the big indicators that I was mentioning. I find that's interesting because it does put the bike on a par with the car within the road itself. And so in this case, you feel, I think, legitimatized to be on the road and not to be on the sidewalk. So it's an interesting example of how that could work. And sidewalks have also been enlarged. And as you can see, they're very easy to go up and down. It's because there's big attractors in this section, such as the Markthalle, which is a place where people can eat. It was important also to facilitate to go from one side to the other. So I think that's fairly well done, but it's still a very complicated place because of the number of lanes. It's pretty still impressive, and it's I still believe that you have to be a relatively good biker to be able to use the lane on the road here. But I did see, we did see in the beginning of the video, some people with their families, some people with it's regular cyclists, not just very fast cyclists, and also people with their families. So maybe we can show some other videos of Basel, and we'll discuss Basel later on.
Yes, it's charging now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say that there is a usually common discussion. It's imported a little bit from the United States that cyclists should have protected bike lanes. It's like a kind of a mantra that we are importing, which is, I understand. We are a little bit afraid of cars. So it is a debate that is interesting. Should we go for protected bike lanes in European cities when sometimes there is not exactly a way to do, totally separated bike lanes? Or shall we more go for reducing speeds? That's something that we have something to discuss, because it's quite obvious from what you showed, Sonia, that probably children will have problems, or people which are a little bit more afraid, are a little bit not safe on this kind of situations.
Here, on the contrary, I find is a very good example. This Cannonfeld is one of the major crossroads in Basel. It's really major. It brings in several very large and important roads, some that come from the border, some that come from the city center. And it's a place which is also a major public transport hub. There are several buses, there are trams here. And I was amazed. I was there several times over the course of 3 days filming. And I was amazed at how easy mostly the situation went, considering how complex the hub, this crossroads is. But I think they did a very good job in several aspects. They put a lot of greenery around and a lot of trees. And that definitely gives it a feeling of being more like in the middle of not really a park, but I mean, it definitely doesn't look like the regular crossroads and it does make it easier because it creates subspaces where people can then kind of take it one problem at a time, if I can say, because there are indeed quite a few problems in crossing this section. But it's interesting the way that it does go. It does make it easier for people to see, and to deal with each part of the crossing at a time, and also to be able to go around in a better way. And this other example is a brand new example in Altsville, so very close to the border. This was an ancient, it's still an industrial part of the city, and it has also a lot of places where there are a lot of sports equipment on this section. It's interesting, this section, because there are actually two parallel infrastructures. One is kind of a greenway, which is very soft, following a little river. And the other one is this one that we're seeing right now, which is really more on the urban side of things, where the part of the industrial section is. You can see it's kind of, one part is industrial, one part is already, because it's at the border, it's agricultural space. And they put also pedagogical radars to observe, to make the cars observe the 30 km/h. I found it interesting because indeed it made it easier for the bikes and for the kids especially to use this place. You could also see it's a place where there's a lot of places for the kids to play, and there's a lot of signs to say that. I also really much like the fact that each time there's a little intersection, they put these signs on the ground to say, here you are again on a shared space. It's pedestrians and bikes, and there are senses, but you can also see what I really like about this proposal is that it is really large. I didn't feel even when there was a
it's
time
like 4 meters, I would say.
Yeah, when the soccer players all came out with their bikes and all the families came out with their bikes and their kids, you still had space as a pedestrian to be there, and all the people could really join in. So I thought that's an interesting example, but of course it means you have to be very generous in the way that you plan your roads, so that you really can gain all that space to share. But
You want
it
to
is
go
indeed a
to-
lane like another lane. Maybe we can show.
Do you want to go to the next Basel or Copenhagen?
Maybe we can go to the Copenhagen examples, but maybe
just
it would be.
so yeah, Copenhagen. I should go for the first Copenhagen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to tell you that this is actually something that it is, because I spoke in the first session that maybe, and Monderman had this idea that the city should be pedestrian-dominated spaces and car-dominated spaces, but there is a lot of intermediate spaces, and this is an example of intermediate space. Yeah, that we have pedestrians and we have cars. So then the situation cannot be so clear and black and white. And here in these areas that there is not a lot of pedestrians, and there is not a lot of cyclists, there is something that me professionally, I accept this kind of sharing, and I would like to know your opinion, and the people in the public, you can also come to stage to speak about it. I think this is an interesting situation that I actually professionally, and not as a Secretary General of the International Federation of Pedestrians, I accept, and I accept that this is a possibility, especially because the line of sight is very visible, so they are actually seeing each other very well. The problem is when there is like blind angles, and yes, that's a problem. But
that's why it's always at the places where there are intersections with these little other walks that come from the neighborhoods,
exactly, yes.
And that's where they put these signs on the ground. So
Okay.
I find each time as a rappel to tell you that it's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to close, Basil, Alexandre and Maria, and anybody from the public, if they want to come to stage, they are very welcome to comment with voice or camera at the same time. Alexandre?
Yes, Mario, thank you. Mario, as you just said, many of those facilities for cycling are not inclusive because the risk-averse people and the children would not be really welcome on them. So those videos don't really make Basel a very attractive place for cycling. Many roads are too wide. They encourage speeding among motorists. The one problem at a time principle that Sonia mentioned, it comes, I believe, from the 70s, and this is an engineering principle that created some of the most dreadful and space-wasting junctions in the world. And so we need to be careful when applying this principle to urban design. Of course, here we see a very wide sidewalk that is shared. Doesn't seem to cause any problem. But this whole urban furniture also shocks me. Look at the pedestrian island. You see the granite block that is supposed to protect pedestrians? Raised from the ground by, what, less than 10 centimeters? It surely protects cars if they crash into it, but it doesn't protect pedestrians.
I would like to add that in Basel, the normal speed, even in roads like this, is 30, and they are generalizing the idea of the 30 kilometers per hour. And they have a lot of encounter areas, also at 20 kilometers per hour. And this is more an example of a place where you go when you are on the urban. But as I said, and they have a lot of that in Basel, and I didn't want to show here that video, but there is a video that is exactly the same, let's say, itinerary, but it's on a very protected lane, which, as I said, goes along a little river, is in the trees, and it's totally protected from traffic. So actually, there is an option for all those
Sonia,
people who wouldn't want to go.
Sonia, we're showing us the difficult situations.
Yes, I'm showing the difficult situations, and I'm also showing these difficult situations because I believe we'll have more and more of them. What I retained from this example from Basel is that we are now also trying to insert this type of micromobilities in roads that were previously 2 lanes, and it can be still 2 lanes of cars, and some roads also, like the one we saw before, where the speed regimen is still 50. And I think it's important that we look at that, because in a way it's easy to make places which are 20 kilometers per hour, 30 kilometers per hour, but it's not so easy when you have to insert with 50 kilometers per hour.
And that's the challenge of the MORE project that I spoke about in the first session, which is indeed this problem of cities that are, for deliveries, for ports, and from the European strategic network. And when they get into the city, how do they interact? So that's where the compromises come. And because indeed the city centers, we know more or less what to do. We just make pedestrian or we make shared spaces, but these situations are quite tricky. I have to say that the videos, sometimes they didn't look very pleasant or nice, but at least the speeds were very Swiss. So, Maria, do you have anything to say? Anybody from the stage can come to the stage if they want. Maria.
Yes, well, in addition to what has been said, maybe I can refer to something that Sonia pointed out, which was the signals with the bicycles being shown. And I do agree that I think that's very good. And also it links to all the discussion that's currently ongoing about wayfinding, also trying to harmonize the wayfinding systems for bicycle networks, for example, all over Europe. So just to think that in this case, I think that was a good example. But I do agree that in this kind of very wide with several lanes, like the perceived danger at least is quite high still. So that I agree.
Yes. Okay, just to tell you, if you are seeing us, that you have an orange button on the corner, on the upper right corner, an orange button, and you can come to the stage, and you are very welcome to the stage. If we say something that you totally disagree, that's really nice, and we want to hear from you. If you want to add something, please do so. You can use also the chat. Okay. Okay. Yes, Isabel in the chat explained that you can come in and then leave stage. Okay. Feel free to come in. So let's now go for Copenhagen, I think.
So the Copenhagen examples are interesting. I will show you several bridges. The first one, the Brygge Bridge, which was done. It was really the very first bridge in the port of Copenhagen. Oh, that's actually the last one, but it's interesting as well. Maybe we start with this one. This is a good example, actually, I find personally, in the sense that it goes well. Here, the speed was limited to 10 kilometers per hour, and you can see how the bicycles are kind of in a slow mode, and there's quite a lot of space for the pedestrians and the bicycles, not just to transit, but also to sojourn. And I find it's an interesting way of putting things. And when people need to deviate themselves, then they do it. But also the general speeds here are really not encouraging going fast. So people take their time, and it kind of really is a way of a design that pardons distraction. It actually kind of even encourages it. And in a way, even if everybody's distracted here, it's not a problem, and it just works pretty fine. I really like this bridge. You know that Copenhagen builds a bridge every 2 years or so. They've built seven, 8 bridges now for pedestrians and bikes. Maybe we can show the other one, the Brygge Bridge, because it's an earlier example, which I find is absolutely not working that well. Of course, it's a crossing bridge, so it also has. Oh no, you're still on the same one.
Same one. Okay.
But and it's just interesting to see how different it is if you make it in a separate mode or if you make it in a shared mode. And most of the bridges which are being made now in Copenhagen are much broader. Here, maybe we can cut a bit the sound, yeah. And the interesting thing about this area here is we are in the South Haven part, and there's a very big commercial center right next to this plaza where the bridge comes in, the Fisketorvet, and there's also a big train station. So it's a place where there's a lot of people, and as you can see, even though the space is very wide, it's very complicated because of the fact that they still draw lines on the ground where the cycles are supposed to be, and then it kind of becomes a cycle highway. And it is pretty difficult for the pedestrians. You can see here that it's a real separated infrastructure, But as you can see, the high density of pedestrians is absolutely not, in my point of view, well accommodated on the pedestrian side of things. And on the bike side, I'm not saying it's also very dense, a bit less dense, but usually also pretty charged. And it's typically an infrastructure that if you really wanted to keep it that way, you can also see how space is actually taken just for the separation itself. It's almost a full meter. Maybe we could have done things differently in that sense. And this part here is now where this cycle brone is, the one that you probably know, the red one. So it's really a connection which is very important for cycling. But as you can see, there's also a lot of pedestrians. And what I find a bit of pity in this example is that even though we have a lot of space, it's a full plaza, we still have conflicts, like if we were in a small space, just because of the way that this design on the ground is made and makes it still pretty complicated to cross and to go from one side to the other. I felt personally very insecure in this place, even though there was only bikes to conflict with, must I say, but it felt just as horrid as if it was on a regular road. So I find it interesting to show that even in a place which is totally supposedly only for people in micro-mobility situations, it can still be a very difficult thing to live through, I mean. And maybe we can show the superkillen example if you have it there. Probably most of you already know it. I still do find it each time I go there. I'm still so surprised at how well it works. And I find it really interesting that the fact that the fact that the bike lane is inserted within a much larger public space, but the public space that is occupied, contrary to what we have seen before, which was only made for transit. Here we really have a situation where it's actually even maybe over full, maybe you would say, with lots of different things, such as these playways for kids and all the urban furniture for people to sit and all the things that are happening around. But I personally find that superkillen really works much better in terms of the way I almost never see conflicts there, almost never film anybody, pushing their buttons to take you out of the way or things like that. It really works much better in terms of the way that people can cross these different infrastructures for bikes, and you can see that even though even though there's a lot of bikes as well, there's lots of bikes, there's lots of pedestrians, there's lots of people, but I think the fact that people are used in this section, that they can have all the time pedestrians coming in and out, they will have a lot of kids, a lot of poussette, a lot of people using the space. There's also a lot of, I saw a lot of handicapped people here, and because it's all kind of permeable and it's fairly easy to go from one space to the other, and because of the fact that there are a lot of static pedestrians, I think this place here basically works fairly well compared to other places in Copenhagen where it's more for transit. So the reason I chose this video is to show that, is to make us think about how the infrastructures that we're building, are they supposed to be only for transit, or are they supposed to be for life, for the life of the neighborhood, for people to do things? And when people do things around the space to circulate, then it becomes much more civilized. The whole interaction aspect of it becomes much easier also on the bike lanes and on the shared space, because of all these people using it, not just on a linear basis, but also on this crossing basis. And so it's interesting to see how the more people cross the space, the more in the end speeds are self-regulated, and the more it works globally. We see here the other part of superkillen. Maybe you're more familiar with this part, which is not the red part, but is the black part with the lines. It's all part of the same dispositif, but there's a road that separates both. And all these insertions of places to play and places to sit really play an important part in the way that the bicycles are behaving, and more generally, of course, micro-mobility. In Copenhagen, we don't see. There are also, of course, scooters, not as many as we would see in other cities, I think because of the uptake already so big of the bike. But what's interesting in Copenhagen is all these different bikes, right? There are the bikes where people are lying down. There are all these cargo bikes. There are electric bikes. There are normal bikes. There are people who go fast. There are people who go slow. Whole families going on a bike. So it's still a situation where you do need a lot of space for all these types of different bikes, and because of all these types also of different pedestrians. The pedestrians themselves also are very different. You have, again, all families, people who are going fast, people who are going slow, people who are together, people who are alone. So it's also a situation where it's a full public space. But I do believe, and this case shows that it's interesting when you have an approach where it's more like a rue place, more like a plaza street rather than just a street. And indeed, the insertion of the bike lane, there is a bike lane for those who want to go fast, and all the other bikes just go around the space where kind of they want. And even when I say they go fast, but they don't go as fast as to provoke accidents or frottement. It's really very well self-regulated. I must say that at the end of this aménagement, there are more problems on the other side, at the extremity part, because there is less animation, there are less of these dispositifs to animate public space, and so it becomes more of a transit, and it works less well. So it's interesting to see the effect of having things happening on the sidewalks of the infrastructure, if I can say so. So the fact that the public space is very animated on its second skin, it really makes a change on how people behave when they are transiting around. That's what I find the most interesting phenomenon of this example. So yeah, maybe we can discuss.
Yes, we are getting to the end of the time, but I think we can have toleration for another one or two from another city. What a wonderful example, this last one, especially the black area. I think it's really nice.
Yeah, the black area is amazing. See here the bistro with the little place for the kids to play. And this is the insertion with the street, and it's a very heavy street, very trafficked, a lot of cars, and I find it amazing how these things really calm down the general ambiance of this place.
Yeah, and that's something that is a lesson to take, because in promenades all over the world, the cyclists and the micro conflict with pedestrians, there is a lot of controversy, and there is this traffic engineering idea that we should segregate and channeling. The problem is when you give space to bicycles, they will go faster because they feel authorized to do so. So in fact, it's a counterintuitive way of solving the problem, and can be even a worse problem when you actually channel the bicycles too much. So making the bike feel that they are in the pedestrian space is probably better for pedestrians and for cyclists than just tell them that you have their own their own space. The other thing is what you said is that maybe we should start transforming corridors in living spaces. And of course, corridors are a bit of a waste in houses. Our houses, the corridors are only to hang painting.
Yeah.
So we need probably to transform corridor spaces into living spaces, and that's one of the things. So Alexandre on Maria, and I say again, if someone is in the public and knows Copenhagen or wants to comment, please do so and come and press the orange button on the corner, and you can come to the stage.
Yes, Mario, you said that separating cyclists will make their speed higher. This is probably true. But on the second video from Sonia, the thing that didn't work so well, it is also true that when cyclists are in greater numbers, their speed can also go up. And this was the case. I mean, this is the curse of successful cities, that they manage to get so many people on bikes that that behaviors can deteriorate.
Yes.
For that could be to have many bridges, many cycling streets to sort of disseminate the cycling traffic across the city. Yes. Another solution to be trialed on that big pedestrian piazza could be to remove all the cycling markings.
Yeah.
Cyclists would follow their desire line, but they would feel that they are invited on a pedestrian space, simply speaking.
Yes. Maria? Sound.
Sorry. Yes, no, I really liked how you explained and how you introduced, Sonia, this concept of how living places close to transit areas helps like to regulate in a quite natural way and to insert these places to live. So I think this is very important in urban areas. No, so something that I take also from this example from Superkillen is how we can use creatively materials, textures, shapes, and I think there's a lot to learn from these kind of examples where we are using a variety of tools. No, so it's we saw the forms, the textures, the materials. And another comment is that, and we've discussed this previously, is should there be or should there not be big expensive projects for pedestrians, for cyclists, or for these kind of spaces, because there's sometimes some arguments against them because they should not. But on the other hand, there's arguments in favor that they can be helpful to visualize this changing paradigm. No, so these very iconic projects and others. For example, you showed also this bridge, which was quite fancy in a way, so that these kind of projects can also visualize and make it communicate this changing paradigm, which I think is also important.
Yes, I want to add that one thing you remark is that when you make an artist intervene, so is what the case with the circle Bruin, this one where there was a lot of space, the red, this kind of, that looked like a ship kind of a place with these little circles, the circle Bruin bridge. It's an artist that conceived this bridge with, of course, the engineers and the architects. But I also see that in the Stadt Lounge of St. Gallen, for instance, and other projects where artists go inside. You really see that there's a different approach to the space and the way it will be shared, and it works much better, I must say. It's also the case of now the Bonaventure highway that was transformed in Montreal. It also has artist interventions, and it really adds something to the space, which is amazing. And going back to this example of Superkillen, the reason why it's so colorful and there's all these materials and all these crazy things is because it was totally conceived with the population of those two neighborhoods. And there were more than 100 nationalities participating in the conception of this project. And they all contributed. For instance, this octopus, the black octopus that you saw, was the Japanese community, or the fountain that you saw is the people from Morocco. And all of the things that you see there are suggestions of the people who live there. And I find that's also interesting. And it's because it's so used. And indeed, it's a living space for the neighborhoods. And then that's also why it works so well, because it was co-conceived with the people. But it's, I guess, in terms of, the strict rules for making public space, I guess a team would never have made it like that. It was because it was done with the public.
Yes, and bring in the artists and bring in the public, because I think sometimes, the academically driven public spaces, sometimes they are locked up in the past, how we used to do things. So we need to bring in people from the outside, the artists and the public, the general public, the children, the people that usually don't design public spaces, because they can bring novelty and fresh things. And the other thing I would say about Alexandre, what he said is, indeed, when cities are very popular with bike lanes, and Copenhagen is one of the cases, I asked one of the mayors of Copenhagen why the bike lanes are becoming congested. So why don't you let the bike lanes free and let the bikes go to the tarmac for the 30-kilometer streets? Why don't you do 30-kilometer streets and then let the bikes off because in a way it looked a little bit like a Stockholm syndrome, that the bikes were all congested in one corner and the streets were very peaceful. So it seemed a bit odd. And he said, yeah, I totally agree with you, but the police does not let us free the bikes to the tarmac. They still want us to make the bikes to be on the bike lane. So we had bike lanes full of congestion, and the streets were actually peaceful and quite nice to ride. So that's an interesting aspect of what you can do. So let's go to Zurich, and I think we can overcome a little bit this timing. I again say that if people can press the orange button if they disagree with us and say something. So feel free to say something. So okay, let me just go to Zurich.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Zurich, well, the interesting thing here is something that we always do have, right, in cities, is this problem of underground passages. Here on a very important connection to the Industriesquartier and the Gewerbeschule in Zurich. So it's on one side you have all the new quartier that has been built, and all this place here is being refurbished with lots of new lots of new areas for living, and it's a place that, as you can see, they try to separate. It works more or less. It's never easy to separate, and especially in underground, because the co-visibility is less. Well, it works as long as it works, and then when it doesn't work, it's more complicated, because people have, I mean, you have less space to really think about what you're going to do, and because of the difference in speeds, I also believe here it's a bit of a problem. We had lots of discussions right now in Geneva, and the reasons I filmed this is because we have a similar situation in one of our greenways that we are planning right now in Geneva, where we also pass such an underground. And I wanted to show this case because undergrounds are always very complicated. And in the case of the Geneva underground, we will have an underground which will be a full 5 minutes. So it's much worse than the one we're seeing here on screen, which is maybe only about 45 seconds or so to cross. But of course, in the case where the problems are not there when you have single files of bicycles and single files of pedestrians, but that almost never happens. Most of the time, as you could see in the video, there are several pedestrians who are walking together, and so this togethering phenomenon is one of the phenomena that makes it a bit harder. And of course, there are also social rules in terms of how the way that you overpass, that you bypass people, and you cannot, for instance, perforate a group or separate a family, so you'll have to go around. And so all these things make it a bit more difficult in terms of that. And the second example I find is really interesting is the way that they did this circuit for leisure, for also inline skating, and of course biking around the airport of Zurich. And I also wanted to show this because it's an interesting example of how to work in industrial areas and in areas where until now we were in very hard mobility aspects. And it's interesting to see how the take-up has been immense. I was here, this is a Sunday, and it was full of people walking and cycling and inline skating, and in a place which really is not sexy, I must say. but that's Zurich, right? They're like this, and they are very much into conquering the whole city and not just the city center or the nice places. And they do believe in a very democratic, I find it's a very democratic fashion, that the whole city should be walkable, the whole city should be cyclable. And so they did this because they knew that many people do like to go and see the planes going up and down, and it does make a very cool area, even though it's a bit industrial, but it's open ground with wide vistas. And I also was astonished by the very good connection to public transport. You see here, there are trains, there are buses, there are many things that can leave you, how to say, I think it's also an important part of the experience, because maybe you get tired after doing this big round trip around the airport. It's about 10 kilometers. So after a while, maybe you get tired of it, and it's very easy to go back to the city or to go back to wherever you come from. The other thing that I also found very interesting is the way that the people who are doing these walks and who are doing this promenade on cycling also use the infrastructure of the airport as a support for proximity. This image here is really interesting. I was myself tired after a while, and I wanted to go find a bus, and I have this app that shows me all the buses. You could see on the screen, screenshot that I had a lot of possibilities to find buses and trains there. And people also use the airport itself as an infrastructure. So when they want to go pee, when they want to go eat, as you can see here, they actually go with their bikes, they go with their scooters and whatever, and with their kids, and they just go to the airport and find things to eat and to drink, and all the logical things that you would have in a city center. They find it directly at the airport. I find that's an interesting way of mutualizing infrastructure.
Okay.
So yeah, there we are.
This is Zurich. We are already overshoot because we will be speaking a little bit on the 30 minutes. You know, we are talking about, you know, interacting each other, and we are talking about points that we're going to say anyway afterwards. So that's fine. Sonia, do you want to choose? Let's do one video of Gothenburg, and maybe
yes, we can do the last one, the Foreningen. So not
okay.
the Eden one, the other one. I find it's more
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay, yeah, that one. And so any comments on here on the Zurich? One thing that Switzerland is working a lot, and you told me that years ago, is working on long distance walking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
and that's very, very interesting, because usually we speak about walking no more than 2-3 kilometers, the max. Walking is actually quite an interesting way of approaching the city. You know, people that have time, there is the public, there is physical exercise, there is the weekends, there is leisure, there is the green corridors that you can use to go for longer distances. I think it is Genève that has worked on that idea, yeah?
Yeah, well, actually, we have we actually have people working on the at the national level. We actually have 12% of Swiss people who walk more than 1 hour a day. So it's actually, there was a thesis done by one of my colleagues at the PFL that showed that. And so it's a general national thing, I would say. Of course, cities such as Zurich and Bern and Basel have a lot of people walking, and they walk long distances. And there's also some phenomenon which is interesting, is that the more we put great public transport with good high frequencies, the more people walk to go there. So we see there is a shift in the way that people perceive the accessibility to public transport, and namely for trains and high frequency infrastructure such as tramways. People will walk up to 2 kilometers, so 25 minutes to go there. And that's an interesting aspect that is a bit new, and it's mainly also due to the better infrastructure that we put in with all these greenways and all these converted normal roads that we kind of converted to greenways, so with dedicated walks and these dedicated spaces, as you could see here, to make it more easy, more comfortable to access these big pieces of infrastructure. And the more we do it, the more we see that people accept to walk longer. And so now it's fairly easy to find people who will go for a 20-minute walk on a normal situation, such as to go not just for leisure, but also to go for shopping or even go to work or things like that. Yeah. And that's an interesting phenomenon.
Yes,
yeah.
There is two things that I would like to point out, and then I'll just ask Alexandre and Maria. One is that walkability and bikeability is actually key for an efficient public transport system, you know, because it brings in clients, and you know, and if you have good public space, you can have actually less stops. You know, people will walk more to go to the stops, so the public transport is more efficient and does not have to stop every 300 meters, can stop maybe every 500 meters, for example, because people are able to walk, is good for their health. And of course, if there is elderly and people that cannot walk, they will have their special transport on demand, for example, you know, that they can use. So that's a very important thing that people have to understand, that public transport needs walkability and bikeability of long distance. Alexandre and Maria, would you like just quickly speak anything about this, or shall we go to Gothenburg and then we warp up?
I can just add that the example of the airport was quite creative from my point of view, no? Because sometimes we think that this kind of long circuits need to be more in natural areas or close to parks, etc. But I find a good example of synergies created, no? With as Sonia said, like the already the public transport that already served this area can be also used by the people walking in the circuit. So I like these examples and how the intermodality is also fostered. No? So this example.
Okay, so let's do Gothenburg. Oh, Alexandre, do you want to say something?
No, thank you, Mario.
No. Okay, so let's go to Gothenburg. And let's do fast, because then we have the questions to cover, okay?
Fast now.
Oh.
Gothenburg is also very interesting for me as a city. They are, in my opinion, one of the best cities to live in these days. Though Stockholm is also very good, but so Gothenburg is the second city, I think, in Sweden. It's a city which has a port, very, very big and important also industrial port, which is also being refurbished quite a lot. There's a lot of new neighborhoods, and I find it interesting to see the way that here they mix well, places which are very wide and also with this approach of having a lot of parks, and especially the second skin of parks, which is a concept that I really enjoy, and I have developed it a lot for Paris and Montreal and Buenos Aires and other cities whom I've worked with. And here they really make it well, in the sense that you see here all this fountain and all these greeneries is actually outside the park, and it's conquering upon the big road network and the big crossroads. And before, it was more the crossroads themselves, and here you see more the entrance to the park and how it was used. I also love this idea of making parking for the prams. So it's pram parking, which is on the sidewalks near the river and also in the entrances of the park. I find it really gives a status to families and the status to pedestrians, which is different from what you normally see. It's interesting the way that there are, of course, a lot of bikes, and it's just full of bikes everywhere here. But it all goes fairly well, also because it's fairly multimodal, I must say. So it's in the sense that there are also a lot of people using public transport, lots of people using the boats. It's a bit like in Lucerne in Switzerland, we have the same type of situation. And the more multimodal a city becomes, the more also it becomes easier, in the sense that that multimodal mentality gets into the heads of the people. And you can see that there is a mutual respect that comes from living yourself several modes, right? You are also yourself using different modes. And of course, shared space and encounter areas are used mostly in most areas. So that does encourage also this type of sharing the space. So you can see also lots of animation, people singing, people, that's also something that I saw in Copenhagen a lot. And it's interesting that they do this in the main roads. I mean, that's what I find so fascinating. They're not just doing it in a normal plaza in the historical part of the city. You can see here this guy singing exactly in the middle of all these buses going along and all these people crossing the street. And it just makes it for an ambiance of plaza where it's a place which is absolutely not a plaza in normal other cities would not feel that way. And I find that also is part of the game, is bringing this plaza culture, even in these nodes which are full of multimodal issues, and seeing how that makes it work better. And what I also find interesting here is the fact that it's really more of a shared logic, as you can see. Not many separations, not many lights. Not many traffic lights. People use really the space, and they use most of the space. They use the space in the center, they use the space on the sidewalks, and I find it's pretty interesting to see how that works. It's also a city which is pretty green, in the sense that there's a lot of parks and there's a lot of greenways also around, so you can feel the whole city is kind of calm down in terms of speed and in terms of noise. And I find actually noise is a very important factor. We haven't discussed it much, but I must say, from the experiment that we did in Place de la Nation in Paris, when we took away half the lanes in this place during the refurbishment, so it went from 26 meters of crossing to only 12 meters of crossing. Not only it made it much more easier for the pedestrians, but also the fact that we then put closer the greenery to the people, and they could hear the birds and they could less hear the cars. And it makes a huge difference in the way that people act and the way that people respect each other and take more time to attune to each other's rhythms. And I find that's also an important aspect of it. I wanted to underline that this aspect of transforming these lanes into green lanes is really an important part of the game. And this noise issue, to calm down the noise, really calms down everything.
Sonia, I think this thing of the noise, when you were talking about the busking that was taking place in a main road, that's exactly what I was thinking. Actually, I saw a few years ago a research saying that birds in cities were only singing at night. And this was puzzling scientists. And then they found out, when they put birds in a lab with car noises, that actually they stopped singing because it's not worth it, you know. And because birds mate by singing, by flirting with each other, birds that were actually not making couples because of the car noise, which is a fascinating thing. And of course, there is a lot of, yes. And so there is a lot of things. For example, people don't use in main roads. They don't use the front rooms of their houses. They only use the back rooms of their houses. So basically, they are paying for square meters they don't use. So it's a really absurd thing. Maria, I think Alexandre, I'm not sure if he's there, but Maria, can you anything about these videos?
Well, just to add to this, that on the topic of noise, that we very recently in POLIS, we participated in a study from the European Commission. It's called the Assessment of Potential Health Benefits of Noise Abatement Measures in the EU. So it looks at this precise topic. So it's something that is being tackled, but it's true. It there's much research needed as well here.
Yes.
I can share the link.
Okay, yes, very good. If you can put on the chat,
Yes.
would be very good. Okay, so this is the time. We have about 20 minutes. So this is the time that we revisit the session of the micromobilities and the tsunami for sidewalks, or an opportunity to rethink. That was the session 2E, if I remember right, something like that. And what were the questions? And I think maybe we should now tell again people that don't be shy. You can come to the stage and participate with us. Just press the orange button on the upper right corner of your screen, and you can come to the stage. And you must be fed up of listening to us. I think in a way was good to see public space. These are challenging times. We wanted to do something more interactive, more fun. Unfortunately, now with the online restrictions, this is what we come up with. So let's speak about typology. So which modes belong to micromobility family? Is this an interesting question or not? Maybe I'm not so, I believe that things will be like a grayscale. So the limits will be always very, very, artificial. So I'm not so much worried about this. I asked Alexandre yesterday or before yesterday, because ITS put the limit on 350. This probably includes mini cars. Okay, that's an option. I'm not against it, but we have to make sure that, for example, mini cars, should they be considered bicycles, and they should be on bike lanes? Probably not. So there might be a place, if ITF believes that micromobility should be equated to bicycles, should maybe not include mini cars. What do you have to say, Alexandre?
So what I said earlier this morning is that we define a big family called micromobility. Okay. That includes true mini microcars.
Okay.
Not the mini cars from main manufacturers, but only things that are truly small, like the Biro.
Yeah. Biro, yes.
And then we think they belong to the same family as big cargo bikes, or as what's the word? I mean, pedal tuk-tuks, and small things that are light. And I think we need more light vehicles in cities.
Okay.
Why do we need a 1-ton vehicle to carry your shopping basket and one person in it?
My problem is that I don't see a Biro using the actual the current bike lane. So
that's because they are too narrow. So I agree with what you said earlier. They should be far bigger,
far more bigger. Yes.
Also because we all know what's coming ahead of us. We're all focused on micromobility today. Tomorrow we will all focus on delivery robots.
Exactly.
And if we can anticipate that and build generous bike lanes, then there will be space for the robots.
Exactly. Totally agree. So in terms of urban typologies, anybody wants to say anything about this? No. Okay. So different zones. I think it's Zaragoza, the municipal regulations of Zaragoza. They don't do anybody. They don't speak about exclusive lanes. They say bike lanes are for speeds up to 25 or 30, I'm not sure. And then if a bicycle wants to be faster, they can go, for example, in the tarmac. So there is a speed limit in the bike lane. I don't know how they control that. Probably they don't. But it's an attempt to say this is not exclusive to a mode. Is based on speed and mass. That's another way of dealing with the problem of different kind of modes. So maybe the public space could be divided. Not all of them, because the city center maybe doesn't need to be divided or separated. But in certain areas outside the center, maybe should be zones based on segregation of weight and size and speed. I have no idea. If anyone wants to chip in on that. Because this relates to the second part. So if we accept as a desirable future the standard of 30 kilometers per hour speed limits in the city and a drastic reduction of private cars in urban areas, does it make sense to segregate spaces in the long future? Probably not. Probably suddenly the bikes can take the road. What do you have to say about that, Alexandre?
Thank you, Mario. The short answer is yes, we still have to segregate, because
Exactly.
traffic speed is only one of three main variables that determine the type of protection we should offer to cyclists.
The other two are? Yeah.
The other two are the motor vehicle traffic volume, of
Exactly.
course, but also the level of service, the level of ambition we want for this cycling route.
Okay.
So traffic volume is critical. There is Dutch guidance on that, I believe, in CRO. The French also have proposed their own guidance, and they say that above 4,000 cars per day, some separation is always needed, whatever the level of service you envisage for the cycling route.
That's why there was a drastic, in the phrase, there is a drastic reduction on private cars. So we are talking about an utopia that most streets will have less than 4,000 cars per day. But you are
the
absolutely
utopia
right.
is coming true. Look at the UK.
Yes,
so many
exactly.
low traffic neighborhoods. These are
Exactly.
neighborhoods where you can drive. You can drive
Exactly.
your car to your front
Exactly.
door. You can get deliveries to your front door, but
Yes.
no one is cutting through your neighborhood. And so every street in such neighborhoods has, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4,000 vehicles per day, absolute maximum.
Exactly. And something that people and tourists and traffic experts or transport or activists that go to the Netherlands, they usually come from America or from other places, and they only see bike lanes, which is a normal human thing. But when I tell them that 70% of Amsterdam or any Dutch city does not have any bike lane, they are a little bit surprised, but it is true. Because they see what is they don't have in their. Americans go back to America saying that there is bike lanes everywhere. No, the Dutch, they don't have bike lanes in 70% of their streets, which they are calm and they are peaceful, and it's okay. So any comments on
I
that?
wanted to add that we have lots of situations in Switzerland where the 30 kilometers per hour are well enough in terms of sharing the space and having the bikes and even the pedestrians but we are more into the 20 kilometers per hour situation now. What we are doing more and more in Switzerland is to really where there's a high density of crossings and where there's a high density of people using both sides of the street, all the sidewalks, if there's a lot of commerces and a lot of things like that. So we are really making the crossings easier with such devices as the central possibilities to cross, such as in the Konitz model or so. There's lots of places where this happens, but also simply if the road is narrow enough, and it goes to this idea of also when you can enlarge the sidewalks enough that the road really becomes only that space where it's only 3 meters or maybe even a bit less depending. And then of course it's also the change in the use of the materials. But what we do see a lot is people, even old cyclists and young cyclists really taking to the streets themselves and not the sidewalks. And I find that's a good evolution, but it does go with the fact of being very generalized in the 30 kilometers per hour and having the hearts of the centralities where people cross a lot, having those as a 20 kilometer per hour. So it's what I call the fried egg. So you have the yellow part of the egg is 20 kilometers per hour, the central parts, and then all this white part of the egg is 30 kilometers per hour. And that usually works better. That's what we see, this fried egg model, if I can say so.
Maria?
Yes, I think, well, regarding the... Sorry, I hear my echo. Okay. The 30 kilometer per hour city-wide limits, I think we can be quite positive because we are seeing how they, well, in Brussels from the 1st of January, in Spain, in Zurich, in Grenoble, so many cities, no, that are, so I think we can be quite positive in this sense. I fully agree that the question of whether segregating or not is very much linked to the urban morphology, to the structure of the streets themselves, and of course cities that were designed and built before the advent of the cars. It's much easier to undo all this car-centric design and give it back to people. It was once also shared space, so it's only undoing what has been done in the last decades. Well, not only, but not that easy. But of course, we have another problem in other parts of the city that were designed in a car-centric way, so where they were designed for cars, and there I think we have another situation, and in many places where speeds, well, it's not that easy to reduce the vehicle limits. We need still segregated lanes, and in any case, I fully agree that for pedestrians, we will always need this protected space for vulnerable people without motorized traffic. So I think
Yes,
that's
excellent.
something we can agree.
Yes, so that's the last point, which is, I think it's very dear to us, International Federation of Pedestrians. So please do not put bicycles on the sidewalk, except in very special situations, in the peripheries where there are not many pedestrians or there are not many cyclists. So don't make the cyclists at war with the pedestrians and vice versa. That's not nice. Please, we don't want any motorized vehicles on the sidewalks. Except, of course, the mobility aid for handicaps, which is okay because there are not many, and we should be nice and gentle, and they should use the sidewalk, which is okay. Alexandre?
Yes, Mario, you mentioned the mobility scooters
Yes.
where people sit on it.
Yes.
Why are they on sidewalks in the first place? Because there is no bike lanes.
Exactly.
If there was protected space, protected bike lanes, they would be there because they would be much more quickly to their destination.
Good point. Good point. I heard that in the new new towns of the Netherlands, where the population is very elderly, there is actually congestion of mobility scooters. You know, that people do have a lot of mobility scooters on the pavement, on the sidewalk, and that becomes a problem for the other pedestrians. So, so then we have, and I think once the society is getting older and older, these mobility scooters will be much more common, and then we might have a problem. So mobility, micro mobility lanes, which is the next topic to close, is, shall bike lanes become micro mobility lanes? Probably yes. They should be much larger. They should go for 2 meters probably, or 2.5 meters. They should have a speed limit on the micro mobility lanes, yes or no? And these should e-bikes and speed pedelecs and other heavy small vehicles like the Bureau should be on the micro mobility lanes and should have speed limit. Alexandre, yes.
Yeah, happy to take this one. In practice, in effect, they already are micromobility lanes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's been understood by everybody very quickly, immediately.
Yeah.
So now changing their names, why not? But what does it bring us?
Yes.
This name is longer to say. People will stick to saying bike lanes forever because it's quicker to say.
Yes. Yes.
And also think of the signage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you abandon the bicycle as the universal signage for this facility?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Will be a historic memory, you know, that they used to be only for bikes in the 20th century. I don't know. And it's true, the bicycle is a very important symbol, and I think it's going to make a revolution on cities with electric bikes, probably much more than micromobilities. The electric bike, I still believe that is going to be much more important than e-scooters. I might be wrong. But there it is. Sónia or Maria?
Yeah, I think it's important that it's a bit like the panel of the encounter areas. I do think that you need to. What is important is to bring about the symbols of this diversity, and I do believe that it's important to show that the road is for diverse uses of people. I personally would, even though if it's maybe a bit more complex to show, but there are lots of designers out there that where
make
their
a fun
only job is
sign.
to make it simple, make this complexity simple. But I do think that we have to take into account this complexity and say that that's what it is, because it is complex, and it is complex because of this biodiversity.
Yeah. Let me say that cyclists are not too happy with all these ideas of bringing in all these newcomers. You know, Maria.
Well, they will also have more space. That's also
Of course,
important.
yes. I think that's the point. If they join efforts with all the scooter users, all these users, they could actually increase the number of kilometers of lanes, their lanes, micromobility lanes or bike lanes, and they can have broader lanes. But Maria, please.
Yeah, so you mentioned about this already complex biodiversity and still growing. There's also this uncertainty factor. You also mentioned in the previous session, Mario, of things that will come and we still don't know, and it's important to consider it. You mentioned the mobility scooters, and I think if we in Europe we have this aging population, of course this is something that is important as well. And the electric bikes, I saw a recent forecast from ICF that the sales of bikes for 2030 are expected to grow by 50%, and leading the curve are the e-bikes. So this also opens a new range of questions, no? And I believe they do have the potential for longer distances, for distances that are not that pleasant for normal conventional bikes, for topography problems, etc. For also for older other target groups, older people that are less fit, etc. So I think this opens a new scenario as well. And regarding the differentiation, I think also Alexander pointed out something in the previous session about keeping the kinetic energy, no? So looking at speed, looking at mass, and looking at also the potential for being dangerous of each kind of vehicle. So I think that's something that we will need to look at as well in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. So I think we have like 1 minute, maybe two, to wrap up. Thank you very much, everybody that was here. Unfortunately, nobody wanted to come to the stage. They were all shy. I'm sure they all had opinions they kept for themselves. Never mind. It's fine. I think this will be recorded, so they will be available for more people to hear. So they can contact us. The International Federation of Pedestrians is always very welcoming. We have social networks that you can join, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, the ITF as well, POLIS. Sónia also is in Twitter. Sónia, do you want to conclude? And we have 1 minute, more or less, too.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure to be with you all and to be able to really discuss with the real situations. I find it's always good when we are making policies or we are drawing the designs in our cities that we go back to see what people really do with it and try to learn from it and see what best we could do with that. And I hope this can inspire some of us, and also other people will later see the videos. And thank you all for chipping in with your ideas. I learned a lot of things today, and we do see that this tsunami is indeed going around the world, and the best will be to see in 10 years' time how the streets will look like. I hope we'll have finally more streets that are reflecting this real amazing biodiversity of ways of moving around our cities.
Yeah, if there is one phrase, it's better to surf than drown. So don't be afraid of the tsunami. And thank you very much, Isabel, Danielle, and Alexia, that they were very, very good and supportive. This was a session that we wanted to push the limits of the online experience. Unfortunately, it was not very possible to do it, but next time we will study other alternatives to do it. Sónia has a lot of fun and has a suitcase full of goodies for people to play with. Okay, I hope to see you. I hope to see you all on Presence, and thank you very much to everybody, and especially the speakers, Maria, Alexandre, and Sónia. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.